Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Before we go ahead with this week's mimer, Lamilchama Oivecha of 40 years ago, Parshas Seitzei, this coming week's Parsha. A quick addendum on the previous mimer of Shabbos Seitzei, which was the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul. At the end of the mimer, I was saying that it's possible that there might be a typo there, but after subsequently hearing the Chazorah, the repetition of the mimer, the way Rabbi Yoel Khan said it, so the Rebbe said at the beginning of the mimer, it's written differently, as is the norm for a mimer to be written. But the nuance that the Rebbe says in the end of the mimer, we said pshat a little bit different than I think what the Rebbe meant in the first place, and that is that the Rebbe explained that the beginning and the end of the Torah, or the Likutei Torah, which are really one book with two different names, both start with the Maimorim of Hashamayim Kisi, which is the beginning of that Haftarah, and end with the last verse, Ki Kasher Hashamayim Chadoshim V'Oretz HaChadosha. So at the end of the Maimer it says that, and the Rebbe really said this at the beginning, or at least that's the way it was in the Chazorah, and we were saying that the Torah Or starts with Hashamayim Kisi, which it does, and the Rebbe said that also the Likutei Torah finishes with a mimer of Ki Kasher, the last verse of that of Torah, Ki Kasher Hashamayim Chadoshim, and a beer, an explanation on that. So that ties it in together. But the Rebbe says even more so that the Torah Or itself begins with the Shemayim Kisi, and the second mimer in Torah Or is also the same Dibur Maskal Ki Kasher Shemayim HaChadoshim. So that's what the Rebbe means, and it's correct there. Therefore, it's not a typo. So, and it says Devachakach Yesh Nebetorah Or Mimer Dibur Maskal Ki Kasher Shemayim Chadoshim. And the Rebbe explains the Seder Navodah. So I just wanted to correct that. We could always correct the mistake. It always returns to the way it should be. Let's begin. So the parsha begins with when you'll go out to war above your enemy, and God will put them into your hands, and you will capture their captives. If you do it, you could have a sit and say, we know the particular lessons that Rabbeim learned from this idea. Mahu diuk loshen ali vechadavke. Why does it say upon your enemy specifically? It would make sense grammatically in the syntax to say when you go wage war either against your enemy or with your enemy, not above your enemy or upon your enemy. They also learn a specific lesson from this, that it says, and you will capture its captives. You just say you could take captives, or you will capture. So umashmo so inyan hu shemash lekech min oiv v'shavisa hu inyan shel shevi lifnei hoye inyan shel shevi lifnei. It seems to be that which you take from the enemy, you'll capture somebody that was already a captive before that. Seemingly that the person was already captured in the hands of the enemy. We have to understand. That's not the way it works in war. Usually the way it works is that when you take something from the enemy, you capture something that the enemy that was the enemy's. In other words, you turn them into the captive. Not capture something which they were holding captive. So what does the verse say? And you will capture its captives. We also have to understand the whole general idea in the subsequent verses and the whole procedure of the story of the maiden who was captured. You have to shave her head, and she has to do her nails. etc. And she'll cry for her father and her mother for a month of time, month of days, 30 days, as is the story of the Isha Yefas Toyar when the beginning of the Parsha. The crux of the explanation is the Ini Kisetz Lamilchama Hu Gam Hoiro. Take out the yellow highlighters, and that the idea of you should go out to war is also a lesson l'chol echad v'achas miYisrael for every single individual Israelite, ubechol hazmanim, and for all time. That I was giving us the lesson, the inspiration, the strength, and the power here from this lesson, because it's a really odd story anyway, and it's a troubling circumstance, and it didn't happen too many times, although King David had children, and the subsequent troubles that Rashi speaks about if you take such a woman, etc., etc. But anyway, what does this mean in a general sense in our own lives? We're not waging war, we're not running after these kind of circumstances, etc. So the Rebbe is going to explain it. The whole Torah, the whole idea of the Torah is instruction, a lesson. The word Torah is from the term instruction and lesson. It's the heritage of the congregation of Jacob. We own it. It has to be pertinent. It's given as an inheritance a heritage to each and every individual Israelite. And since the Torah is a Torah of life, a lesson in life, from this we understand that everything in Torah, including also when you will go out to war, they are a lesson in life for each and every single Israelite, every single Jew. So here it's coming early that this is instruction to and give us help in our own challenges. Fourth time that he says it's for everybody. The explanation of what it means when you go out to war regarding each and every individual Jew. What is this war in our service to God, the mankind's service to God? The person has to conquer the worldly matters and to turn them into vessels and conduits for godliness. This is what it means when it says, and you'll go to war upon your enemies. The person goes to conquer the world and to turn it into a godly vessel, a godly conduit. You have to know from the outset that you're in a situation of that you're above this enemy. You're higher than it. You can do it. Higher than your enemy. Because you're going to this war is according to the command of the Torah, that you will go. That's what the strength of the Torah says this is what you have to do. So you already are empowered. It's not two equal sides. We have an advantage. It's not two equal sides battling and waging war against each other. You find yourself in the first place higher than the enemy. Now that Rebbe explains, and he explains this elsewhere too, even though Rashi explains the Torah is talking about an optional war, not an obligatory war. The obligatory war was when they had to conquer Israel. That was an obligatory war. But when they wanted to expand or something else, it's called Milchemes Reshus. The obligatory war, you couldn't take captives. Everyone had to get killed. Either they could make peace with you or go away. But if they chose to stay and fight, everyone had to be decimated. So here you're taking a woman captive. In the obligatory war, they wouldn't be able to take captives like that. So even though it's talking about a war which is optional, which is you have permission to do it, But the Rebbe teaches a beautiful lesson here. Yesh le'imar pirush b'averes odom. You could say, and like Rabbi Menachem says, you could take it to the bank. This is what it means in your service to God. The koyal kibush inyoni reshush be'elam la'asay some kelim alakus. They're the things that Torah mitzvahs that are straight up, clear cut, things that are obligated to do, things that are forbidden to do. And then there's everything in between and how you will go about it. So how do you live your life? And things that are permissible. Will they be devoted properly to godliness and the godly causes, etc.? That's in Yoni Rishus. So the Rebbe says, this is what it's talking about. It's talking about making your whole life godly. And it's talking about conquering things that are permissible, that you have permission to do in the world, and to make them vessels and conduits for godliness. To serving God, like it says in the chapter 2 of Oivecha, which we're going to learn this Shabbos, that all of your deeds should be for the sake of heaven. Both of these things means everything that you do, meaning things that are optional. And in all your ways, optional, you shall know him. Like it says in the verse in Proverbs, and in this battle, in this war, the person is also over the enemy. Higher than the enemy which he's fighting with. Since his serving God in things that are arbitrary is also according to the Torah chassidic haloshen hakosov medaber shagam milchemes reshus ha'avodah debirur in yoni reshus gam bo medaber hakosov. Like we know that the Torah is talking about specifically the optional war, that in this optional war there also has to be the refinement of the things that are optional, that are arbitrary, that you're allowed to do but not obligated to do and not forbidden to do. Gam bo medaber hakosov, the scriptures referring to this also. Lamilchama zu hi Oivecha, this war is also above the enemy, higher upon the enemy, higher than the enemy. And through this, that when you go out to war, it's in such a manner, the person knows to start with that he's above the enemy. The victory that will happen will also be in a special way. Victory in a very successful way. And the verse continues to say, and God will place the enemy in your hand, place them in your hand, meaning the enemy, the hini yadua. We know that a victory at war could happen in several ways. There's are victories that come with great toil and a strong effort. That means that you have to work real hard, toil, and it's really hard work, like the verse calls the work in Egypt, very hard labor. That can bring a victory. But the Rebbe says, there's also a victory that comes without hard work and toil. In such a way, in such a fashion, that everything is done for you. Even though you're in a situation of war, but nevertheless, the victory could be in a peaceful fashion. And the submission and the dissipation of the opposition in an ultimate fashion. Like we know, like it says in the verse in chapter 55 in Psalms, that my soul was redeemed in peace from battle. Even though there was a situation of a battle and a war, mikrav li, like the verse says, from battle I was redeemed. And nevertheless, the redemption and the victory from this battle was peaceful, was in peace. That also means the word peace, shalom, means complete, and it comes from this term. That's the idea of a victory without great toil. Everything is done for you. That's why it says in the verse, and God will place the enemy into your hand. And God will place him into straight into your hand. Through this, that going out to war is the way it should be. You're going above the enemy. Then the victory will come from above, from the supernal realm, without hard work. In other words, if you have the right attitude, then you're able to convert and devote the worldly things that you come into contact with and make them godly with less effort, with the right attitude and focus. The victory is in a way of a gift and being given to you, like it says, and God will give it, place it. As the rule is, the Talmud tells us, whoever gives with a good eye, gives properly, if you're already giving. That means that the victory is with a good eye and in the ultimate fashion. Now, even though the ultimate of the victory of this war comes from something being drawn from the supernal realm, from above, it's a gift. Nevertheless, it's going to take some work. The point is that there should be refinement of the worldly matters in such a way that it'll be a victory for Israelites like a literal war, literally like a war. The victor, the one who wins the war, captures that of the one that was defeated, till they own it, and you take total ownerships, and they have it in their possession. And in order that the worldly matters should be completely under the ownership of the Israelite, in other words, that will defeat and refine and capture, it's not enough that God gives some extra strength to this. You have to do the work, you have to take possession, you have to own it, as they say. The person has to serve even from the lower realm with his strength, with his power. Then they can be captured under their ownership, in the ultimate fashion. In other words, working hard, you can devote it and focus everything to a spiritual and godly purpose. Just like when it works with the spoils of war, how they're acquired according to the halacha, it goes by taking possession or conquering, etc. As the Rambam brings the rule that comes from the Talmud, that's what it means, that God, the Lord your God, will put it in your hand and you'll take its captives captive. In addition to the victory of the war that will come from God giving from the supernal realm, you have to do your work too. So God, that's why it says it's captives. God is already making it possible and doable, but you have to do your part. Because of Shavisha Shivyoy Dafke. Now the Rebbe continues this nuance and says, that's what it says in the verse, and you will capture its captives, specifically its captives. The conquering and the refining of worldly matters through the service that a person does, turning the worldly matters into vessels and conduits for for the godliness, godly purpose. This idea can be explained also in two ways. Aleph, where's the place of the physical? In the lower realm. But the person, through their service, is able to refine and elevate them and make them pristine and godly and holy. To remove them from their place and elevate them higher than their place, which is in the lower realm. That's the first way of looking at it. They should become godly vessels. Now, Beis, the second way. The true, what do we mean to say that these are their places in the lower realm? No, where do they really come from? They're really created by God. The real true source is in the godly realm. So the place from where they come and their root, their true root of these physical things is the supernal realm, is the godly realm. They were conquered and they descended to the lower realm. The person, through serving God to refine them, etc., he redeems them from their captivity, and he returns them from where they came from in the first place. This is why we were given the physical world, in order to elevate it. And you have to recognize that everything in the world was created for this purpose in the first place. Even though, according to the first way of looking at it, that the first place, the place of physical, is the lower realm. It's in the lower place, and the person elevates that from their place. That is also, of course, this is a very lofty way of serving God. But the second way to recognize that everything is godly, that when you serve God, you're returning it. You're not just elevating something that is there, but you're returning it from where it came in the first place. You're returning the physical matters to their first place, the true place. This adds enthusiasm and life and alacrity in the way we serve. Then it's a way of redeeming captives. Which is, as is well known, a great mitzvah to get somebody out of captivity. Like it's explained in Tanya. Then the chapter 31. There's no greater joyous occasion than one that leaves captivity. And look, we all pray every day. We have people, our brethren, who are in captivity. And we're praying every day. And when the ones that were in captivity and went out, that made the greatest simcha. And and here he's talking about, Tanya brings that as an example. Like as a parable, the prince, the son of the king, that was in captivity, and he was languishing in a jail, in incarceration. He went out to freedom to the home of his father, the king. There's no happy occasion greater than this. And that's why it says in the verse, and you will capture its captives. From this, it understands that the thing that you captured was already in captivity in the hands of the enemy, as we've stated earlier. Canal, in order to increase enthusiasm and alacrity in the way we serve, the verse explains that the way we serve God is that we're taking something out of captivity. In other words, its true place, the physical, is a godly thing. And it was just given here and planted here for us to turn it into the godly, to reveal this godliness. So, taking the physical from the captivity, and returning them to their true place. The great mitzvah of redeeming captives. Here we're not talking about physical captives, we're talking about the whole world. And then the verse subsequently continues to say, and you have to shave her head and do her nails. So the Likutei Torah explains about this. The side is see something interesting regarding hair and nails. The only thing that you can cut them from the body, and it's not painful. Why is it like that? So, why doesn't it hurt? So, according to the Kabbalistic way of looking at it, and Chassidus quoting this, the idea of hair has less, there's less life source to it, and therefore it's not painful at that time, and it's called the moisri moichem. It's from what's the extra of the intellect and the thought process. This is the hair of the head that 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 it's like the extra energy is what gives energy to the hair, so to speak, and the nails are the extras of the intellectual properties, the emotional, the attributes, the midas, and that's from the heart, so to speak. So that's the nails. And a person has to remove this because it's not. It's what didn't reach its ultimate level. It's like it's the extras. It's that which couldn't be used properly, so to speak. In generally speaking, a person serving God goes into two categories: serving God in the intellectual fashion, with the intellect, and serving God with the heart, with the emotions, loving, fearing, etc. Even though there are really three rulers in the body, which it says the brain, the heart, and the liver, Aveda, hein Avedas Hameach, hein Avedas Alev, tzich kshura love lemaisa bepel. Every single 2863. Every single way of serving God has to be connected. First of all, everything's connected to the brain. So even the intellectual and the emotional, and everything that you do, but it has to come to an act, a deed. It has to bring to something, not just to languish and do nothing. So all service has to be connected to bring to an actual deed, an action. The hamaisu iker, the deed is the primary, the action is primary. Therefore, we spoke about the intellect, we spoke about the heart. Then the third one is the liver, and that is the blood flow, so to speak, which gets cleansed with the liver. From the Melech that Rebbe points out here, that therefore these three, it says in Kabbalistic texts, that if you take these three organs, they have the acronym that make up the word king, Melech. Rosh Tevis, Moyach Lev Kovid, or Moichel Liba Kavod, that says in other places in Aramaic. So intellect, brain, heart, liver, spell Melech. So now we are able to rule over these three parts. The Mekivon Shavidos Yalpi Torah, since you're working according to the Torah. Let's just get this connection here for a second. The pasuk says she has to shave the head and remove the nails. This means also the idea of that you have to be focused on the intellectual things for the right purpose, the emotional, and then the actions. And therefore that which is extra, that has to be removed. So that's what I was saying over here. So you're able to control these three things: the intellectual part, the emotional part, and the action. Since you're serving God according to Torah, through the occupation of Torah, taking ownership of the Torah, make the Torah yours. And you become a ruler and you can control over everything. And since the primary and the beginning of serving God is in the heart and in the mind and in the heart, the intellect and the emotion way, and then it gets drawn from that and goes down into deed and action. That's why it says, and you will shave your head and do the nails. Ki b'chdei sheyihi nitzochen Lamilchama b'shleimus tzarich liyos v'gilcha esrei. In order for the victory of the war to be in its ultimate complete way, there has to be the shaving of the head. Hasodas ma'aseh hamoichin. Take over the extra, that which is not necessary in the intellect. V'asasas tziparneha hasodas ma'aseh hamidus. Doing the nails, that removing the extra of the emotions and the attributes, that which is not needed. That's what it means. And you will do the nails. It doesn't say to cut the nails. It doesn't say to remove the nails. It says to do it. It means to repair it. Tikkun. Hainu tikkun hatzipernayim, to fix it. In other words, nails can also be made trimmed, etc. Then the verse continues and says, and she will cry for her father and her mother for a month of days, in other words 30 days, and afterwards you will go and you will marry her and she'll become your wife. We know the explanation in the Lurianic Kabbalah, in his writings. It says the special month of days, that's a reference to the month of Elul, which we are in now. All this that we discussed earlier through the mimer, that you have to elevate everything that we do for a godly purpose, this is for the whole year. For that's enough to go out to war and do the nails, etc. All these things that we spoke about. But in the month of Elul, which is the month of reckoning and accounting, on the past year, and the month of preparation for the coming year, you have to have increased serving God. This is the idea of crying for father and mother. And then afterwards you can come to the next part of the marriage part. Through the proper serving to God, then it becomes the fusion of the Holy One, blessed be He, and Shechina, the fusion and the union of the congregation of Israel, of Knesset Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, and the Holy One, blessed be He, in an ultimate fashion. The Yisrael, so that's the marriage of Israel and God, that Israel and the Torah and the Holy One blessed be He, are all one. The ultimate of this will be in the future to come, the coming of Mashiach. As it will be speedily heard in the cities of Judah and in the courtyards of Jerusalem, the sound of happiness and the sound of joy, the sound of the groom and the sound of the bride. And just not necessarily parenthetically, but this Maimer was on the 14th of Elul, 40 years ago, like we've discussed many times. It gives us a special power, just in general speaking. But the 13th of Elul, the Friday before, it was the anniversary of the Rebbe's father-in-law and the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. So maybe there's a little connection here. It also says in Ecclesiastes that the world was placed in their heart, meaning that everything is dependent on us. And therefore, generally, all the things of the world we also have in the heart of each and every individual. Okay? Take out the yellow markers again. From this we understand that this too, that Rebbe is speaking to each and every one of us. Just like there is the idea of when you'll go out to war over your enemy, and the idea of conquering and refining the world to make it a vessel and conduit for godliness. You have this whole idea in the person on themselves. And what is this about? Like it's explained in the Torah by the Alter Rebbe. Every single individual Israelite has two souls, the godly soul and the animal soul. And the whole idea of going out to war is that the person has to take his holy soul and make it stronger and victorious, and therefore able to refine his body and his animal soul, because it's the fusion, it's the unit of godly soul, animal soul, and the body. And the power has to go to the godly soul. And even though we learned in the Zohar, and it's a passage which we also say, the Minor Loshen, those are the prayers that we say when visiting the holy resting place of a tzaddik. The the body is already holy also, right? There it says that the soul is holy and the body is holy. V'gam hanefesh bahamis he nefesh bahamis the Yisrael. The animal soul is an animal soul of an Israelite. A Yiddish nefesh bahamis, right? A Yiddish animal soul. The noise of the nefesh Elohim kadisha. In addition to the fact that the spirit is holy, the koil b'chinas nefesh, that's going on the level of nefesh, right? The soul has 5 parts and 5 terms that describe it. The lowest one is called nefesh, right? Nefesh, ruach, neshama, right? Soul, spirit, and breath, life source, and yechida, which is the oneness. So the lowest one is nefesh. The higher level, of the third level, which is called neshama, is already holy of holies. But nevertheless, with all these great things, nevertheless, the body and the animal soul conceal and hide it. The animal soul comes along and says, "I'm first. I'm ahead of everything, and I should be boss." The Rebbe here says parenthetically, in the square brackets, this is an explanation of that which Tanya says right at the beginning of chapter 2. The second soul amongst the Israelite is an actual portion of God from above. So the godly soul is called, why it's called the second soul? That should be primary, it should be first and foremost. But since the Talmud says that the animal soul in this union of the world, so that the whole thing is that in order to make the whole godliness coming into the world, it's the animal soul fused with the body that make this challenge. And then godly soul goes into this and joins them. So therefore it's called the second soul. First and foremost, the creation of this unit is the animal soul. Therefore there has to be a battle and a war and a battle of the godly soul with the animal soul. When does that war take place? During the prayer time. Like it says in the Zohar, there's a time for prayer and a time for a battle. So there's the connection. When Jacob is giving the blessing to Joseph, and he says, "I'm giving you the extra portion which I took from the Amorites, from the hand of the Amorites, with my sword and my bow." And Onkelos translates sword and bow with my prayer and my supplication. Through prayer, a person is able to refine the animal soul. And for this reason, there has to be the service of prayer every single day. Since every single day a person is a new creation, a new person, the animal soul also is reinvigorated and is new. So you got to pray again, got to battle it again every single day. You have to refine it from new. And that's the whole idea of going out to war upon your enemy. This is in serving God, in your personal battle. But now we've explained earlier that this is an optional war. It's not an obligatory war. That's what the verse is referring to, the optional war. Move on From this we understand the Gamba when it's Adam koi beproti is al bechinas melcham shel boy. Even when it's talking about the serving God, we're talking about the optional part. This is the toughest part. Parenthetically, the Rebbe in the last Maimon that Rebbe edited and gave us, he spoke about that it takes self-sacrifice to be able to serve God amongst abundance, and that's one of the things there is not just when there's opportunities what to do, but it's with focusing in everything in life to devote it to godliness. Okay, let's go back here. This is the idea that that we are taught that you have to sanctify yourself even in things that are permissible. You have to also not just do carte blanche and everything. Everything has to be with a focus and devotion, etc. A person sanctifies himself also in things that are permissible, but things that you're allowed to do. And the explanation to talk about what's so special about serving God in this way, the sanctifying yourself in things that are already permissible. It's understood from that which is explained in many places about it's explained in many places in Chassidus and more at length in one of the continuums of Amorim of the fourth Rebbe, the Rebbe Marash. And like it says in note 47, that's in the continuum called Matzah Zu of 1880 of Tofresh Mem. B'mailas mitzvahs derabonon. There it's talking about what's special about there are 7 mitzvahs that were rabbinically introduced. In Kaddish Atzchum Mutaloch, that's the idea also of sanctifying yourself in something which is permissible. Al mitzvah. So, what is the advantage of the rabbinically introduced mitzvahs over the mitzvahs of the Torah? And there he speaks about this nuance of the similarity to sanctify yourself in things which are permissible. The hine mitzvahs that I say mitzvahs. In the mitzvahs of the Torah, there are the positive commandments and the negative commandments. It's explained in several places about and at length in the Likutei Torah, in the portion of Pekudah, there's an advantage of the negative commandments, the things that you can't do by not doing something when you're tempted to do it, over the positive mitzvahs, doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Why? The light and energy which is drawn forth through performing a positive mitzvah is light that then is enclosed in a vessel, in a particular thing. You did every mitzvah has a shear, has an amount, it's performed with something physical, it's done in a certain way, whatever mitzvah it may be, taking a palm branch, the lulav, right, the tefillin, or even charity, it's money, whatever it is, the mitzvah is enclosed in the action that was done, including sometimes the person who's doing the positive mitzvah of loving God. But it's in a kli, it's in a vessel, it's contained. Ma'aseh mitzvahs, the performance of mitzvahs. The mizesha ma'aseh mitzvahs a kli la'orizeh, and since the action of the mitzvah is a vessel for this light, the mislavish b'seiche, which is enclosed within it, muchach sheru mugbal. But that proves then it's a limited amount, because the mitzvah has an amount, a set, whatever is prescribed. Therefore, it's stuck, or it's limited in the dimension of the vessel. But now, the energy, the light that comes forth when the negative mitzvah is performed, in other words, abstaining from something that you wanted to do, that's already an unlimited light and energy. Doesn't get contained in a vessel. It's something that's powerful. When you abstain from something, you brought godliness into the world by not doing something, and then it didn't have to get contained in anything that happened. So therefore, it's an unlimited energy. Therefore, to make this energy flow, it's not through an action, it's through negation of action, through abstaining. So it's not through an action, a clear vessel. Ele de shlila v'heder asiyah, through negating and abstaining from doing something. The person pushes away the prohibition and doesn't do the prohibition. But now there's an advantage of the mitzvahs of the Rabbanon. Yesh b'maylas beza and yonim the mitzvahs say the mitzvahs mitzvahs say. The rabbinically introduced mitzvahs has both of these advantages. The advantage of the negative commandment and the positive commandment. The mitzvah tegen the mitzvahs drabonon intchies verchokas ra. On the one hand, the mitzvahs, the mitzvah that's rabbinically introduced is also pushing away and making the evil far away. It's also an unlimited light because it's not prescribed in the Torah, etc. Just like similar to the light which comes through not doing a negative mitzvah. The performance of the negative mitzvah, meaning not doing it. But on the other hand, but it's also they're kept through doing something. So they're special. Therefore, this type of unlimited light is able to also be enclosed in a vessel. But when you perform one of the rabbinically introduced mitzvahs, like lighting Hanukkah candles, lighting Shabbos candles, right? The mitzvahs on Purim, saying Hallel, washing the hands. That's also what our sages told us, that the words of the sages are even more stringent than the words of the way of the words of the mitzvahs of the Torah. And they also said that they're more dear than the regular mitzvahs. So what's special? Hainu shemaylas divrei seifim eini rak b'chumriyusam. It's not just in the advantage of the rabbinically introduced mitzvahs. It's not just in their materialism, that they push away the evil. That, like we said before, in order to get the most powerful light, it's something that doesn't get limited into a vessel, right? But it's not just that idea, but more than that, this great light does go into a vessel because it's not something that was prescribed originally in the Torah. So therefore, it's a mixture of both, so to speak. While derech ze moving be'inyan kadesh atzvum muterloch, and now the Rebbe is bringing this nuance around to, compare it to three things: to sanctifying yourself in what's permissible, which is like the advantage of rabbinically introduced mitzvahs, which is like the light which comes forth from fulfilling a negative mitzvah, abstaining from doing it. So this is all on that realm. When it's not limited, when it's something which there's more leeway, then it's able to draw down more light. Now that I was framing this a little bit historically, the 7 mitzvahs of the rabbis began in a later time than the time of the mitzvahs that were given in the Torah. It was in a time where Israel was descended from their previous higher levels in the way they were earlier, and they were in a lower level. Even the earliest ones, which were already introduced by King Solomon, which is already right after King David, of course, the mitzvah of the Eruv, the various Eruvin, and the washing of the hands, the Chsiv Bey Vayeshev Shleim Al Kisei Avaya, which now we know that when King Solomon was ruling, it was a great time. It's one of the greatest times in our history. Nevertheless, it was a lower time than the time of David. Although King Solomon, of course, built the temple, first temple, but nevertheless, there was a greater devotion and closeness to God in the time of King David. The Chsiv Bey, regarding regarding King David, it says, Hakol b'chsav miyad havayo alai hiskil. David says everything came to him from God directly, and in the time of his rule, everything was in a more godly fashion. In a moving Tamadavar, so it's not understood why does this great element of energy and light from God is it introduced in a time when we're further away from, let's say, the time of the giving of the Torah. That we understand now. Since the rabbinically introduced mitzvahs have something an advantage, they're higher than the Torah's mitzvahs. In order to come to this lofty level, it comes specifically through the great descension, a greater descension, and therefore we're able to reach the higher level. That descension was for the purpose of the elevation and the ascension. Through this descension, we're able to come to this lofty level of energy and light that's unlimited. Therefore, it was in that time, in those times, that the 7 mitzvahs were introduced. And of course, the next one, later on, Purim was between the temples, and the final one was the Hanukkah story, which happened during the Second Temple period. The Rebbe says, you could say this, and like Rabbi Menachem says, you could take it to the bank. Now the Rebbe says, subsequently, everything that was introduced throughout the generations is to make things better. It's because we were away further, they're really in a higher level. So the Rebbe says, all of the decrees and all of the things that were introduced and as something that'll help out, and all of the customs that were decreed and introduced and conducted daily Yisrael through the great leaders of Israel, over there in every generation, this all is included in the idea of serving God, of sanctifying yourself with what is permissible. Through this, the unlimited light of God is drawn forth, and this is able to be enclosed in vessels in everything that we have. And the Rebbe finishes off like to the ultimate serving in all of this. When you go out to war over your enemies, it's come to next week's pasha, and you will come to the land to the truthful redemption through our righteous Mashiach mitzvahs. And there we will fulfill the mitzvah of the first fruits. That's what it's talked about in the beginning of the parasha of Kisove. The Kiyama mitzvahs love in a way that the mitzvahs will be performed when Mashiach comes in the future to come. Like we say. And we will do there the mitzvahs as your will. The mitzvah of the first fruits is the beginning of serving God. That's called the first fruits from all the fruit of the land. And then it comes in a way of broadening and spreading. Like it says when the Lord your God will broaden your boundaries. Then we'll have the land, the 3 additional lands of Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. This will all be in a revealed sense. Like it says, and the glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh together will be able to see this. Not just that the eyes, the fleshy, the physical eyes will see. And the Rebbe says this many times. Like it says, and our eyes will see it. More than that, the flesh itself will see. It says, kol basar yachtav. It says all flesh will see. It doesn't say the eyes of the flesh, right? In other words, it'll be be able to be perceived by everything. Begula mitzvah shleima de Mashiach tzidkenu, with the truthful redemption through our righteous Mashiach l'chaim.